Hello. Welcome to this talk about how we recreated the Elköp site in the Nordic, and also how to improve the performance. I will talk about two things in the talks: why, how to drive change in a large enterprise. Just for some background checks, are most of you consultants? How many are consultants? Yeah, so like 98%. That's good. I think some of the things I will talk about in that first part will definitely be relevant for you as well. I've been working as a consultant for 10 plus years, both in Sweden and Norway, and I hope it can help you those parts well to actually try to make an impact in the customer where you're working. And the second part, of course, will be more into why we choose Next and Vercel and how that played out. So Elköp is the Nordic brand that we have. We also have Elgiganten here in Sweden and Denmark, and Giganti in Finland. We are by far the largest electronic retailer in the Nordic, when we have a lot of stores, etc. And when I joined Elköp, we had just released, it was 5 years ago, we had just sort of released the first version of the new site. I was not part of that team, and I think it iteratively improved over the years. But like about 2 years ago, it was not uncommon that you can end up with a screen looking like this for 20 seconds. It was not always like this, but happened frequently enough. And I'm all for like having some dynamic content on your page, but I think this for 20 seconds with no price and whatnot, it's not good enough. And I myself does not have patience enough to wait there. Of course, if you have good enough offers, customers will stay, and I do think we have a lot of good offers a lot of the time, but it's not good enough. And also it tells from like the comments on Reddit, the site is so horrible that I ended up going somewhere else. That was definitely good news for us, and if one person is writing that, I'm guessing the hundreds more are doing the same thing. And then we had another comment here. I work for Elköp, and it's as frustrating for us working at Elköp, and it's probably working in the stores, which is our best customers in a way. And this is just two. You can find a lot of these on Reddit. Hopefully, like the last 2 years back or something. Not now, but we have moved from that to this. This is like the core vitals, as you can see it from Vercel dashboard. So this is on desktop scores. We also have the mobile scores. We're not perfect yet, almost, but I think we're doing fairly fine. And we also, if we go on like the official page speed, we do score good on all scores this is for Norway. I think we are doing good on all countries now, except for Finland, where the IMP score might be right above 200 milliseconds. And this sort of matters. Like these scores, you can always trick them if you want to. Some might be hard, but at least they give you some indication of the performance of the application. And just to show some visual of how the application behaved before the rewrite to move to Next.js, and then also how the application is now when we have made some improvements, and also how it was before. I have some small recordings here. So this is how it was when we launched the Next.js application. This is the old one. We were running it side by side with the Next.js application. We should start now. Yeah. So this is then we have the Next.js application to write. And it's faster, for sure, but it still takes, you see some lag on the images, etc. And then we have the last one, which is how the application is now. And this is significantly faster, because on January this year, we had a CDN proxy on top of Vercel, which is not ideal, and they don't recommend it. You can have it. It did benefit us for quite some time, because we did want to have a gradual rollout, and then we can have the proxy to route to both applications at the same time. But you can see it has a significant impact on the performance. And I think, yeah, it took 33 seconds now to get to the checkout. The old one with Next.js is soon there. And this one here you can see that the button is not even responding. I think the user recorder is actually click this button 3 or 4 times, but nothing happens. And that's not how an application should be. So that's what I wanted to improve. And I think we went from, as you can see here, 1 minute, 55 seconds to 33 seconds. And it was not like a speed run by me. I might have done something slightly faster. It was just less weight and have a button that works. So, short about me before we move on. I'm Tomas Janson. I work for Nordic. Been working there for 5 years. I've been only working on the ecom part for 2 years or so. I'm a principal software engineer at Elkjøp. And Elkjøp Nordic is, as I said, the largest electronic retailer in the Nordic. We have like more than 10,000 employees. I think it's around 13 maybe. 400 stores. So our store presence is also an important part for us. And we have stores in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. That's where we have our e-commerce site, but we also have franchise in Faroe Island, Iceland, Greenland, I think. I start to get older, I realize. I actually tried to make this ChatGPT profile picture yesterday, and it made me make me look much younger. And then I realized I am old. And I've been doing coding for quite some time. I started doing Perl programming, which was also web, I think, at that point in time. Well, actually, we used it for testing. And then I had done some SAP and ABAP coding, and also JavaScript, C#, F#, you name it. And done everything from a lot of infrastructure code to front-end development, as I'm doing now. I like to try to contribute where I think I might have a good impact. I do think you always need to try to challenge status quo, so change is something I really believe in, because otherwise you will sort of stagnate. Since the industry is moving so fast, you have to try something all the time. It might be that you're doing the wrong thing, but then you can at least try something new. So that's in short about me. So, how do you get started with doing a rewrite that we did? As I said, the new site that we had, the old new site, if you like, it was sort of the first version was finished about 5 years ago when I started working at Elkjøp Nordic. And that was quite a significant investment. At that point, I think they were working on it 2-3 years. And when I say finished, it was not really finished. We launched it, but it was sort of finished maybe 2 years ago when we decided to actually move to the new solution. And it takes some... You need to have the right motivation actually to replace something that's that new. Because when a company like Elkjøp make that kind of investment, they do it because they think it will last for at least 5-10 years or so. And now I said we should replace it because it's not good enough after less than a year almost. So how do you actually drive that kind of change? And as developers, I do think we are good at a lot of things, but we might not be good at talking with business. And that's something we definitely need to improve. So how can we actually make an impact with how we communicate? I think that's very important. And there are different things we can do, and hopefully there were some tips coming here. So the first thing we should do is, in my opinion, talk more about the problem we want to solve, and not as much about the technology. We love to talk about technology. I can do that all day if I want to. But if you're talking to to the management, or if you talk to a customer and try to talk technology to them, they couldn't care less. Management and shareholders, they want to know, how can you increase revenue? How can you cut down cost? If you're going to say we're going to have React with something, they don't care. They won't know what's the impact. And when you talk about customers, how will that change, improve the customers? In our specific scenario, I do think we have had a significant impact on revenue. It is quite hard for us to actually measure the impact of the site on revenue, because the macroeconomic situation, it goes up and down. We have seen positive numbers since we went live, but that doesn't mean it was the solution that drive those numbers. It can still be macroeconomical effects. So when we sold this as an idea, we addressed the cost perspective, because we had a team, 15 to 20 developer at the time work on the front-end solution, and our point was that we can do it with 3 or 4 and finish in a year or so. And that will also be the operational cost after that. So when you have done identify like this is a problem you do want to solve, you also need to quantify it somehow. And this is why I think that like, the business side is actually getting heard a lot more than us, because they work with the Excel spreadsheet and they quantify everything somehow. I'm not saying they are right in how they quantify things, but they make assumptions, and we need to make assumptions as well. And that's perfectly fine as long as you are clear with that this is an assumption and we are thinking this is how it will play out. Of course, you can have wrong, but the business can also be wrong in their assumptions. But at least you have to do it and put the number on it. So for our perspective, it was we are going to cut down costs this much, and we will have sort of a graph of when we will basically break even compared to today's situation. And it's not like super hard. If you just list down the cost and if that's your address, then you basically see like this is how much we're going to cut down and this much how we cost, and then you see like the breaking point. And then it's like make it clear to make a decision. And this thing I think is very important. And especially if you are a consultant, I think this is even more important. Because as a consultant, you come from the outside. And you need to be sort of included to make a change. And I also think it's even more, if you take our scenario, where we actually replaced all these 15 people who were consultants. So if you don't drive that change, you might actually be replaced by someone who drives that change. So I think it's very important for actually consultants to actually be even more proactive. And that makes it even more important to pair up with someone to get the influence into the organization. And I was like still fairly new, and because the of Nordic, we are 500 people there almost. And I do not have like the large network. I showed some people of what I think we can do. And I also had some also external consultant with me to help build a really, really early proof of concept. But then I also got some interest, if you like, by one other colleague or a great friend of mine as well, who really believe that this is something we can do. And having this first follower is super important. First off, he's your first follower, so someone actually believes you. And he also had like a greater network into the organization than me. And he also complimented me on things I am not as good at, like creating the business case, creating the presentation, etc. And without him, I don't think it will ever happen. Or at least it would take a much longer time. And that was partly because he complimented me and also had a network that was not the same network as I had. So we together created then that's actually the next slide. We started creating this business case, basically a large, not large, like 10, 15 slides of what is it we want to achieve, and also a plan of how we're going to do it. And it's also important to be very focused. When we started out, we said we're going to create a new website, replace the CMS, replace the search, but then we just settled on just do the website. I'm not saying I don't want to do other things, but you have to focus down to actually make it both more realistic and also make it easy to deliver. Because if you can do the first thing, you can also make it easy to get acceptance to maybe do the other things later on, if it makes sense. In addition to just creating the presentation, as I said, we created a super early proof of concept. So we show that we can actually do this. That's where I had my other external consultants helping me out. So we did this basically on the evenings, and at the point of time, we were working on the sort of infrastructure side on the old site. So while we were waiting for the old application to build, which could take like 30, 40 minutes, we had time to spend on this proof of concept. And that took us quite far. So it was pretty fun. So we created this early proof of concept so we can actually show like this is possible. See what we have done in basically 20 hours. And that gives some confidence that we can go with. And also we do not sell this as you typically do in a large enterprise. Like we're going to have this massive projects over 2 years. We said give us 2 months, and it was me and 2 other developers. We saw basically over the summer in 2023. And then we can check in August or September or something, do we want to continue or not? And for us, that's a pretty small investment. So it's hard to say no to that, which was sort of tactical as well. But we then could also show that this is actually doable, and then we could continue afterwards. And it is also okay to fail in that point. And that you shouldn't think about it as a failure. It's more like a learning. If we were fail after the summer, I would be perfectly fine. And we at least learned that, okay, this is not the right way to do. But we failed cheap. And that's I think, that's a good thing. Yeah, and when we are in discussions with management, whatever, someone will always tell you that the timing is bad. And have anyone been in a situation where timing is good? I don't think so. Like timing would have been good like 5 years ago instead of doing the old solution, but that's hard. And I mean, of course, it can be bad timing, but if the business case is strong enough, I think it's good to start as soon as you can. But of course, someone needs to look at the whole organization, at what else are we doing, etc. But timing is always bad, so that's like a really poor argument, in my opinion. You have to bring out other things you are doing. I think that sort of concludes like the first part of the presentation. So let's go into the more technical part of why we choose Next.js. How many here are working with Next.js? About 40%. That's good. And front-end developers, that was like 80, wasn't it? I think so. Yeah. You know enough, I think. So why Next.js? When I think about web application, I think about web application as like a spectrum. You have like these pink blogs on one end, which are super static, and then you have like really dynamic applications, think trading, gaming, chat applications, whatever. And when you're picking a solution, it's good to know where you are on that spectrum, as I said. And also, like all tools can most of the time solve everything on that spectrum. Just a matter of like where do they excel in a way. We had Angular before. I would not choose Angular for anything on this spectrum, but if you would choose Angular for anything on this spectrum, I would go for the more dynamic part. But because it is a framework, in my opinion, that was meant to sort of replace desktop applications, quite dynamic interactions, etc. But I think you can do that in many other frameworks as well, and also easier without inheritance. So we choose Next.js mainly because it's React-based, and there's a quite large talent pool when it comes to React, in my opinion. And in a way, it's sort of quite boring choice. It's sort of not the standard now, but I would guess like the majority of new, larger front-end applications are probably using or starting with Next today. If that's a good or bad thing, I don't know. But it was like the existing talent pool we had, new React, and I also think that the future pool will also most likely know React. So it's quite easy choice in my opinion there. I'm not saying like choosing something else like Svelte or something other even more performant is a bad thing. I would love to go down that route, but you need to have like this critical mass who believe in that to do that. I have tried doing that, not with Svelte or Go, but with other things, and it's hard to push those kind of things. You don't have enough people in the company organization actually believe in those technology choices, and I'm really passionate about it. So like, do it if you want to run into the wall fast yourself. That's perfectly fine and learn, but I recommend having more people. So what did we learn after we chose Next? We started off going to Edge, which is something Vercel pushed quite a lot, since we were hosting on Vercel. And Edge basically means this. You have the application there running close to the client, so the communication there is very, very, very fast, which sounds really good as long as you don't have like these long arrows toward your APIs, which we had. Then it's horrible. So that was like a learning we had back. I don't know why we even think about this before, but that's fine. So like a couple of days before we said we're going to do 100% live, we said, okay, let's skip this Edge thing and go to create a static site instead. And that basically means running on functions, because if you're running on Edge, you can't cache the application either on Vercel, because that's not always dynamic, which sounds really good, because then you can do more personalized stuff, which we do want to do, at least in the future. But then we moved to static, and we managed to finish the migration like 2 hours before we said we're going to do 100% live to the application and start a campaign. And it worked out fine. No stress. Other thing, it was something we really learned in January this year. Network jumps matter. I think this really depends on your overall infrastructure. We had, like I said, another CDN on top of our application acting as a proxy, and that is fine. It was necessary for us for a long time, but you can see a significant decrease when we went live here. We had like a 40% improvement on the time to first byte. I choose time to first byte because that's really what matters. All the other metrics are sort of dependent on time to first byte. If you have a low time to first byte, you will get faster images, faster contentful paint, faster interactions when you're talking with your server. So this is sort of the core very vital, if you ask me. So if you can, remove as many network layers as you can, but still try to keep it safe. And here you see like the graph over time, and the bar at top shows that we actually managed to do something. Now we're going to Next.js. How Next.js works is you have something called layouts and pages. Next.js is very opinionated. So if you can't buy into those opinions that Next.js has, choose something else. I mean, there are a lot of good options out there. So don't torture yourself with something you don't like. I'm perfectly fine with this because I don't like reinventing the wheel. So if someone says to me, oh, here's a structure you could follow, I'm perfectly fine. So I buy into this. I'm not sure how much, like, of course, we're experimenting with things, but at least it gives us some kind of direction of, like, if you want to have some routing, you do it with folders. Okay, and we don't need to think about that. So a short demo of how that works. So for me, I said, like, this is more than for how you organize your application. But you do get some other benefits, as you will see in this short demo here. You see the flashing thing when I reload the screen. This is because of how the application is composed. So it only renders the parts that are necessary when you're navigating. So when I go to marketing, the whole layout here is still, an outer layout is still fixed, but it reloads the page. And I go to orders, it only reloads that. And now I have a listed layout inside the layout, which I will show, and only that part is reloading. So it gives you sort of visual stability as well, and also a nice organization. And it is quite simple. So here I have my layout demo. I have the outer layout, the fading component, that's a green flashy thingy. And then I have the children, which I then can compose with my outer route, which is orders and marketing. And this one has another inner layout, which has its children, which are then sort of injected there. So this is quite easy to sort of make this, to compose an application together using this. React Server Components, that's also fun. Was sort of a new thing that came with Next.js 13, was the first one implemented. It's not a Next.js thing, it is a React thing, but Next.js was the one pushing it first, I think, and a lot has influenced how it works. If you want to build a complete static application in Next.js, that's what you get as default. Everything is a React Server component. So then you get everything server rendered as long as you don't say, I want to have this client side. And you can do that with a directive called useClient that you put on top of a file. And if you do that on a component, you get a client component, which I mark as green. And that's perfectly fine. And still, like, client component is also first rendered on the server, which is good to know. So you get all the good stuff with like a sort of fast initial view, but then the client takes over. If you do it higher up in the tree, all the component that client component is initializing will also be a client component, which is really important to know because that will impact your bundle size. So in this case, the client bundle will, of course, include the Next.js sort of runtime, if you like, on the client, but then you have the green and the blue box will be in the bundle. There are ways to work around this. Instead of having the client instantiating the component, you can have like a server component, putting those in as children to the client component, and then it will actually not be a client component. And also have a short demo showing this. So I have a really sort of schizophrenic component called server client, which is green when it is on the server, and it's red when it is on the client. So we had the first page, which is a whole green box. In there, I have a server client, which is the green box to the right, because it still runs on the server. Then I have a client component, which is the one below here. This is a client component, and this would also make this box red. But here you see that I sort of injecting or putting children as a server client. So these two components here are rendered on the server and not on the client, which is a really good thing you should leverage as much as possible if you're using Next.js. But then I have this other server client component. Since this is instantiated from the client, it is also marked as a client component. Next part, internationalization, or I call this a middleware demo. The middleware is, I think, one of the really great features I have in Next.js. It's not a new concept by any means. We use it to actually decide, like, all the application we have is one application serving all countries. And we do that by leveraging middleware. So we're selecting which host name are you coming from, and depending on that host name, we are rendering a different part of the application, basically. So the route you see in the browser is not the same as the necessary application route. It doesn't have to. That's something you can change in the middleware. And the way we do it here with like is something you can do like this. This is sort of the concept here is the same we have. We have slightly more complex, which I'll come back to in the next slide. But here I have an application where I can say hey in a lot of different languages. But the cool thing here that you don't see is it's always the same URL, no matter what I have, but it's always a static response, a cached response I get back. So whenever I click one of these links, which links to /no/sc, I actually check the code there, or now you try to go to the Swedish version, then I will set a cookie for you telling that you are from Sweden, and then redirect the route, and it will serve you the static context. So if the cookie exists, then we will serve you the site for that language. And that way I can have a cached response that's sort of individually per user. And this is a really powerful thing, because you can use this for personalized content, for example, and create a cached experience. For us, working in retail, we could have like a cookie with your persona. And if you are a gamer, we can give you a gamer homepage that is cached and as fast as our original landing page. So it's a super powerful feature that I really recommend looking into. The next part is one thing that Mikael mentioned in his talk, feature toggling. I think this is, I haven't used this a lot before, but now we use it for everything, basically. And this is something that really can make you move much faster when it comes to development. Because if you have feature toggling in place, you can push things to production whenever you like, basically. As long as it's behind a toggle, it won't reach the customers, and that's perfectly fine. So we try to work very small, also, like Mika mentioned, because that helps us reduce the cycle time, and also put things behind the toggle, so allow our internal users to try things out before it reaches our customers. And when using Vercel, we actually get the feature toggles included in the toolbar. So I can show my feature light theme, for example, and now I have a slides light theme. And this is still sort of, I'm checking my toggles now in middleware, so I get still a static and cached experience with the toggles enabled. And that is also something I do recommend. If you're going to create a performance application, you should try to resolve the toggles that you need to render the application should be resolved in the middleware, and then you can actually use it in the applications without getting a dynamic page. And you need to have a static page to be able to cache it. I like the black better, so let's remove this. I don't think, even if you don't run on Vercel, you can create a UI like that can be simply create yourself. It shouldn't be too hard. I do recommend maybe to encrypt the flags, etc., so not anyone can go and change them. That's something we get out of the box, I think. And I also recommend not implementing the flags yourself. We did that because there was not a framework for it. I will use the flags SDK that Mika had in his slides, and also look at what's called pre-compute flags that would give you the static experience. Server actions is also another feature that came in Next, I think it was 14, maybe 13, which, I mean, was a lot of fuss when this came out, I think, unnecessary, if you ask me. For all this is just an abstraction on top of some API, so you don't have to write all that boilerplate code yourself. It's not like super magical. I think it's nice. We're not using it a lot, but we're using it some. But if you can use it, but there are, of course, disadvantages because you can't get everything as a post, so caching becomes awkward, for example. So I've tried that. Don't use it. Forget. But it's really convenient when it works and fits your needs. So definitely recommend using it. And a short demo of that as well. I have my really black theme here that you can see. So if I don't write anything, you can see I have. This actual validation happening on the server is still fast, but if I do a name, it takes even longer time because now it's actually simulate a database thingy. And you can also attach it. This is a form, but you can also attach it directly to a button. So this is something actually that runs on the server and then triggers up the alert on the client. And the way you have server actions is also quite straightforward. I have two different components here, a form demo and client demo, which is here. And then I have my submit. You pass it in as an action to your form. And this submit then calls this handle form action. And the form action, I like to put them in a dedicated file. You don't have to do it, but it makes things cleaner if you ask me. And then by using have this use server on top, I'm telling like this thing. This is sort of a boundary. This thing should live on the server. And then Next.js will create all that boilerplate that make that happen for you. So you have the handle form action and the button clicked action. So if it was running locally, you would actually see this log statement being printed on the server and not on the client. And for the client demo, you just add it as basically a regular on-click function. So caching is hard, especially if you're doing Next.js, because there have been some confusion over the years. I think they had some good intentions with Next 13, where they said, okay, now everything in fetch will be cached by default. I mean, intentions were good, but they also messed up the whole API for it, because that was not how the API worked. So if you're going to do something with an API, please don't change how it works. So it made it somewhat confusing. How do you opt out, etc. And you explicitly need to opt out, which made things very confusing. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but if you are going to use caching, I recommend trying to use the revalidate functions and not time-based. It might be harder to set up, but it's much more efficient if you ask me. Because if you have time-based revalidation on things, I mean, it's perfectly fine if you can have time-based on the whole page. But as soon as you start breaking it down on all the different functions, and all those functions might be used in multiple different pages, it gets complicated and confusing on which time is going to be used. If you have like 30 minutes here and then 10 minutes on another function, and they are used, like, I don't even know how it works. I think it's the shortest time that should always win or something like that, but it's hard to verify. But we have, if it's set up to be relation based on events, it's much easier. You can just have an endpoint that you call, like when a CMS page change or a product change, you can just call this endpoint with a specific tag, and it clears the cache for that data. And talk about caching, I really look forward to the future, actually, with Next.js. because they are coming with something called partial pre-rendering and streaming. I hope it will be announced or released this year. I think partial pre-rendering has been sort of in a canary release for 1.5 years or so, but they have redone everything about how caching works. You will now start using a use cache directive inside function, and it will be also much. The scope will be quite different because now you're limited when it comes to caching to when you set in the cache keys or tags. That's what you can use to revalidate the cache. They have to be set up front, which might make it hard when you have sort of recursive things. If you ask for a page from a CMS, for example, you might get some response back saying, oh, you need to also get this content over here based on this ID. But you can't actually set the cache tag for that ID, but you can if you have, you can that with a new API for caching in Next.js. And then they also have streaming, which allows you, or streaming and partial pre-rendering, which allows you to return a really fast initial response and then stream in the dynamic bits as they are finished. And I have a short demo how that can actually look like. So here you see both things are sort of loading because it was the first time I went to this page. If I do a refresh now, only the second box is loading. So on the first request, both these boxes or HTML, these boxes, just had sort of a marker thing in the HTML. The second time, it actually figured out that, okay, this second box can actually be static. So it has sort of injected that in the HTML. So my now cache response is actually containing the whole layout plus this box, which is really good from a performance perspective. And it's a really good feature if you're working for e-commerce, where we have like a lot of product lists with filters, etc. Because we can then deliver sort of the static shell with everything, and then we can stream in the products and the filters when they are finished for a really fast experience. Now we sort of can do that, but it requires a lot more work. And if I do a revalidate here, just using a tag again, I will get 2 loading boxes, and then they will stream when they are finished. So as long as they are revalidating, you will still get a fast response, but you will only get the skeleton until it's resolved. So lastly, some Vercel features that we're using. Deployments. Mikael mentioned this in his talk about preview deploys. This is something you get for free from Vercel. So every time you push to Vercel, you get a new deployment. And that's very good. You should also leverage another feature called, I should change around this, I think, environments. Because then you can pick one of your commits and say, okay, I want to deploy this to this environment. So you can have like a test preview and test, and you will actually deploy your branch with the production configuration. And deploying with production configuration doesn't mean it is the production version, because you still need to assign the domains. And that's something you should try to separate, or at least we do. So deployments and environments are really 2 key things. And of course, the speed insight is another thing that we look at a lot, especially since performance was one of the important things for us. So we are looking at this a lot. And the last thing, which you can't see here, is this small little widget where we have like the toolbars with both the feature toggles, which we use both developers, but also everyone in the organization that do the testing on the site are using the feature toggles. They also have things to look at layout shift and accessibility, etc. All those things come free. You can also comment on the page. We did that in the beginning, but we stopped doing it because there were too many comments that things were wrong and not like the old site. So we got overflooded, basically. So now we use Jira for everything, which is fine. It is. To summarize, change is hard, but possible. But it could take time, and you will get some resistance for sure. So you need to like the pain to do it. But I think it's fun and rewarding when it works. And to create a performant application, technology is super important, but you need to have the people and a passion to actually do it. And as I mentioned, the spectrum part is super important. Know where your application is, and also when you're working on the application, a specific feature, know what that feature is. Is that a dynamic feature, static feature? How should it work? Next.js for me lets me focus on application. I don't need to think about build pipelines, etc. And that's all taken care of. I haven't touched Webpack. I didn't know Webpack before Next.js. I don't know now either, so I'm quite happy with that. It just works. And I think Vercel sort of solves the same thing for as Next.js, but they do it on the infrastructure side. I'm perfectly fine doing infrastructure work. Like I've been working with infrastructure as code for many years, but if I don't have to, that's also very good as I see it. So Vercel solves that problem for me. We can just put the code together with Next.js, ship it to Vercel, and Vercel hosts the application for us. And I think that's everything. Thank you.